study session at 7:08. All members are present, and I will call on Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just get the presentation going here. So tonight we'll be discussing with council the city's response to the Main Street fire. I've asked Chief Parkinson to be here to talk about the fire initial response, and then we'll go into different department updates on how they responded and next steps moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Parkinson. This advances you.
All right, everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Thank you for having me tonight. So the slideshow that I have for you is actually from our after action review. So if some of the slides are overly detailed or under detailed, that's why. So we kind of stole a presentation, but after any incident of this size or any structure fire, we do a review internally with all personnel that were there to look at what went well and things that we can improve on. So just giving you a little, I know everybody is familiar with the downtown area, but some of the things that you'll see referenced in here refer to things like Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta. And so we label the sides of a building that way so that we have common terminology on the fire ground. So if you work your way from the front of the building, like you see there, that would be the Alpha side. And then we go clockwise around the building. So the Bravo side would be to the west, the Charlie side to the north, and the Delta side to the east. So this would be what we would refer to as the Charlie side. So the back side of the building, what it would have looked like before the fire. Point out this picture just because as we get more into cause and origin of fire, what we're looking at is around where the gas meters are there next to the green dumpster and where there's a little wall between the black truck is where we see the fire starting that day. Like I said, we'll get into cause a little bit later. So just some information as far as dispatch goes. So we were notified at 02:32 in the morning of a fire. You'll see that the address comes in a little bit different than where the fire actually was. That's not uncommon, especially in structure fires, depending on how it's communicated in. And that we were on scene at 02:42. I suspect that that's a little bit longer than what is actual. And so what I would guess is that we were probably very near the area within 5, 6, 7 minutes. But then, honing in on exactly where we needed to get and, to kind of sandwich in there on the backside of that building between Buttered Biscuit and the backside of the bar and the attic there took a little bit of finagling. So basically 10 minutes from time of call to when we were on scene, reported a structure fire. Next one is just when our command unit showed up on scene, but then at 02:58, personnel requested a second alarm, and then at 03:29, requested a third alarm. I recognize most people have probably heard those terms, first alarm and second alarm, but just for those who aren't familiar with what that means. So it's basically a way to get additional units. So a first alarm for us will typically get us about 18 personnel. It depends on what type of occupancy it is. In other words, a single wide or a single family residence is going to take less units than if a large warehouse is on fire. So on something like this, typically a first alarm assignment brings about 18 personnel. So something like 5 fire engines and a ladder truck and a command unit. Each successive alarm brings roughly about that same amount. So what we ended up with on scene was roughly about 60 personnel, and maybe a little bit more than that when you add in overhead personnel to help with administrative duties. But so pretty substantial. That's unusual. You hear 3 alarm when we talk about things like chili or something like that. But for us, that's something like maybe once every 5 years or something like that. It is pretty uncommon to see an incident get that large. So as far as the fire department is concerned and our initial goals, strategic and tactical decision making, what you see up on the screen, our goal on a fire like this is contain it to the unit of origin, primary searches of occupancies next door. So Bravo and Delta, so those would be to the occupancies to the east and the west of the structure fire. Make sure that fire didn't extend into those, and then also prepare and have units on both sides of the building if it happened to extend. Thankfully, in the case of this fire, it had, in the construction term, we call them firewalls. So they had a wall that had not been penetrated that went up each side of the building, separating those occupancies from the occupancies next to them. For a building of this age, it would not have been uncommon not to see that. So that was a big help in containing the fire just to the units that it was in. So just some pictures for you looking at the Alpha Division. So again, this would be the Main Street side. And so at this point, we're at third alarm, and with each alarm, we get an additional ladder truck. So that's a simple way for us to be able to count how many alarms we're at. But so we had 2 ladder trucks on the front, one operating off the back. So the back side of the building, so this is after the bulk of the fire has been extinguished. I'll get into some of the challenges that we had later, but you can see some of the hanging power lines kind of to the upper left of that picture. So there would have been power lines going to the back of the building, and where that fire is over kind of center right of the screen, that would be where the gas meter would have been. One of the challenges that we had during this fire was that as the fire was working through that area, it ended up melting the gas meters, which ended up venting natural gas on fire for about 3.5 hours. For whatever reason, normally there's what we would call a foot valve or a shutoff valve in the street, whether that was paved over at some point in history or something to that effect. PSE was unable to locate it, so they had to come out and actually jackhammer up the asphalt to find a valve to be able to crimp the gas line off to get it shut off. So that impeded our ability to put the fire out. Just some more pictures kind of moving along throughout the early morning, and as we transferred command, as an incident like this overnight that's going to extend into the next day. Our personnel changed shift at 8 a.m. So it's actually quite a big deal to get personnel swapped out. Thankfully, we were able to get all new personnel down to the scene by 9 a.m. and everybody off and headed back home around that same time. Just some other pictures as we mop up the rest of the day. And so some of the issues that we had as far as safety considerations, pretty unique building. I mean, most people know that this is an early 1900s building. So pretty unique in just its construction style compared to what a brand new building would look like. Typical building like this, they get renovated and then the floor plan gets very chopped up and very difficult to access over time. Most of those occupancies along Main Street have basements, which create a huge challenge for us. Once that floor becomes compromised, there's a big risk of collapse that we don't want to be involved in. Like I pointed out, there were power lines along the back and also the natural gas fire that we had to work with for about 3.5 hours. And as the fire progressed, eventually you'll see it says an exclusionary zone on the Charlie side. So on the back side of the building, we became concerned as the floor became unstable that would all the brick wall that's up there end up toppling over. So a decision was made to change our tactics and move away from the back of the building. As far as support functions on scene, so this is outside of all the fire trucks that were there. So a command team was assembled. So we had about 5 or 6 overhead personnel, so chief officers, myself included, but people outside of the normal dispatch, public information officer, a number of logistical challenges to get, as we have a fire that goes on for that long. We've got 3 different rounds of meals. We have bathrooms, everything else that comes up during the normal course of business. Like I mentioned, with shift change and getting personnel swapped out. Not to mention, how do we cover the rest of the district? So in this case, basically for the next 12 hours or so, units from Graham, Central Pierce, Gig Harbor, and West Pierce, and Buckley and Ording covered the rest of the district. So City of Sumner included. Fire investigation, while we are the lead as we provide the contract for fire investigation to the City of Sumner, this one extends really above our skill set for a fire this complex. So we bring in Pierce County Fire Marshals to run the investigation for us. Do not have a final report on that. And again, we'll hit a little bit more as Chief Marecki talks a little bit later on here, but had scene security to deal with throughout once the fire kind of went out, then the public becomes more interested in seeing what's going on as the day progresses. We've got, business owners that are concerned about getting in and out, that want to check on their businesses, but then you have the public who wants to see if the businesses are open. For whatever reason, they think that's a good idea in the middle of the fire. But as the day progressed on, I know Jason and I worked, at least every hour we were in contact, coming up with a plan to be able to get some temporary fencing out there, which I think some of that is still up there along Main Street. And then because of security concerns and just fire rekindling, we did keep a fire watch. Even though the fire was out by the end of the first day, we kept the unit on scene overnight until the next morning at 9. Same items that I talked about before as far as challenges that we faced with down power lines, natural gas, the wind issues that we had during the overnight period of the fire, just because it creates a challenge for personnel, whether they're wearing an air mask or not, as the wind tends to circle around. We had the water runoff issues. Most people are probably aware that we had a plug drain on the back of the building. And so that caused overflow of water to go into the Buttered Biscuit. I think they had 2 or 3 feet of water in their business. And that's one of those challenges where it's difficult for us to fix in the middle of a fire. And, if you manage to see that the drain was plugged, you'd clear it. And a minute later, you're going to have a bunch of leaves falling back into it and plugging up the ability for the water runoff to go away. Deep-seated fire for us, hard to get to, which is why it took quite a while. And then just the exclusionary zones, the concern of the building collapsing on the backside there. And then just kind of overall, and again, like I said, when we review this with crews, we look at, what were the challenges and then what were our successes. We're able to get some clearly defined geographic areas and get personnel set up in the right positions. The ladder truck, this is one of those successes of having a ladder truck that can steer at both ends of it. So to be able to get it back behind that building and kind of wedge it between Buttered Biscuit and get out from underneath power lines. Had emergency traffic. So when we made the decision to shift as the building became unstable, as we were concerned about that, that takes a whole fire ground shift with emergency traffic that has to be repeated through the dispatch center. And then you have to check to make sure all personnel are aware of it. And with that many people on scene, it's actually quite a bit of work. Went very seamlessly. Fire went out. No one was hurt, firefighters or public. We were able to get everybody evacuated. On an incident like that, the number of agencies I'm sure that anybody saw from any pictures takes a tremendous amount of work and coordination of people that don't necessarily work together every day, went off seamlessly, and getting enough support personnel on scene to help with all those things like food and porta potties, not to mention all the help that we received from the city in coordination with trying to turn over the event eventually.
So before we get into the city response, other than cause, does anybody have any questions for Chief Parkinson?
Councilmember Newman.
With all the damage done, what is the estimation for, I would say, what's the level of damage for adjacent buildings? But then also, is there ever a time when this building will be safe for entry?
We're going to cover that in just a few minutes.
Okay, then. Thanks.
It's a great segue.
Councilmember Hofstadter.
So how did it get up so far? If it was just started there in the back, how did it get up? And I mean, the flames were shooting straight out the top.
Yeah, and so a couple things to think about is the times that I put up on the screen were what time we were notified. And so part of the unknown is what time did it actually start, and so how long did it have to progress. If you saw some of those earlier pictures in there, it had T111, so it had wood siding over that whole what I would call garage area, so that allowed it to extend up pretty quick. Yeah, and again, just not knowing how long had it been sitting there burning. If it were a few minutes, that's one thing, but if it had been going for quite a while.
Did you think it was burning just on the outside, or did it get inside? Right, like I get the T111 going, but how did it get into the middle of that building?
So as soon as it burnt through the ceiling of that covered area, you're into the truss space. And so it would be able to run all up and down the inside of that building. So.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else?
Okay, so I'm gonna cover the first few hours on the city response, and then we'll go into the recovery slides and also our cause investigation that we did with the fire department. So obviously, when you have an incident of this size, our police are some of the first people on scene. In fact, a couple of our officers were in the Mason building, and there's a couple of apartment units up there. They actually evacuated those residents. And it was quite smoky according to the officers that were up there, and the walls were even starting to glow red on one side of it. So that tells you how fast that this fire did progress, because obviously our officers were there right away. They immediately notified the command duty officer that night, which was Deputy Chief McCurdy, and also called in the initial round of Public Works on-call folks. And within a half hour, Carmen and I were both notified, and we're both on scene by 4 o'clock that morning to help coordinate the city response. You can see our first tweet on this was about an hour after the initial call, about 30 minutes after it went to a 3-alarm fire. And when I got here, it was very clear that we needed additional resources. So I got a hold of Public Works Director Dahlem, as well as our on-call Public Works crews. I had them call out basically the next shift, which was due to come on work at 7 a.m. because we had a lot of roads to close down. We brought in additional police resources as well, just from a scene security. As the chief mentioned here, as soon as the daylight came up, everybody started getting up, and we had pedestrians all over the place on Main Street. Also coordinated with the school district. I was in contact with Dr. Dent, probably 5:30 in the morning. Give her a heads up because with the power being out, it also affected north. We believe their administration building was out, and we knew that with transportation and bus routes, that was something that they needed to be aware of. Also by 7 a.m., we were getting a hold of our on-call building official, working to secure temporary fencing, and also working with Pierce County DEM to secure some excavators, because we knew that fire had extended in and we knew they needed those. So excavators, as well as one of their building officials, was on scene all day that day. Since as you know, we are in a contract position right now for building official. We're trying to fill that position. Throughout the day, we end up having to tow one vehicle to where that excavator is sitting. That's got its bucket up in that window. Just couldn't get a hold of the registered owner. He was actually out of town, out of state, I believe. So we needed to tow that vehicle. And then we also had this little thing called the homecoming parade. So we were in contact with the school district all day. We had an internal mini EOC meeting here at 8 o'clock. We figured out how to reroute the parade to keep that going. So we worked with the school district on that, as well as our internal resources to get that set up. And then we also scheduled a 1 p.m. business meeting. So we made flyers, posted on social media, went around, got a whole bunch of people in the room to talk about the fire. So this is a picture from that Friday at 1 o'clock. Just about every business downtown was represented here. And really the purpose of this was to share what we knew, share what next steps were, and really to establish some contacts with them and understand what they were going through and how we could help them. So this was the first business meeting that we held. We actually held one last week that I'll talk about in just a moment. We also met with the affected property owners after this meeting to make sure that we had good contact information and answer specific questions with, how are they going to be able to get back in their business? What are the next steps? So by 4:30, hey, we're holding the parade. So this is a view from Wood. One way it's closed for the fire, the other way it's closed for the parade. As some of you already mentioned, at the parade, the school district really embraced this. They did raise quite a bit, $3,200, I believe, $3,300 just that night to help support the fire fund. We worked with Rotary and SMSA to get that fund set up. So SMSA has a fire fund that you can still donate to that will help support these businesses through their recovery. Most of our city staff went home. Well, the ones that started at between 4 and 7 in the morning finally went home about 7 o'clock. Friday night, we had off duty, or not off duty, we had a police officer stay all night to help secure the scene. As John mentioned, they had fire watch on one side of the building, and then we also had public works crews to help secure the roads. So on Saturday, we came back with the building official to do a better assessment of those buildings. Honestly, on Friday, the buildings adjacent to the one that burned had a lot of smoke in it, so our building official wasn't able to get in and do a proper assessment. Also on that Saturday, our public works crews put up a lot of fencing, did a lot of sidewalk cleanup, street cleanup, sweeping. This picture right here, it's kind of a cool story. This is Field Supervisor John Wells. In order to put the fence up against the building, because it was safe to do that, so we didn't have to close the sidewalk, we needed to break out the rest of the windows that the fire department had already started breaking out. So this particular business owner had all their records in this business, didn't have anything backed up to the cloud or anything. So we were able to not enter the building, but use a rake and other tools to pull as much as we could out of there, and able to actually get all of their business records on a thumb drive, which is just quite amazing. They were extremely grateful for that. Obviously, the police department continued their investigation over the weekend. And spent a lot of time reviewing security footage. We asked at the first business meeting, we asked all of them to go back and look at their security footage and provide us with anything that they saw that night on camera. And we were getting that coming in on Saturday. Also talked to the media again on Saturday. This was in the Seattle Times over the weekend. And obviously the day of the event, we had all four news channels here, as well as Cairo Radio and News Tribune. Just a lot of media attention from this. And then also on Saturday, our crews, after doing all this, were dealing with Sunset Festival of Bands. So we had a lot of bands and their families in town and looking to walk Main Street. So we had a lot of people, that were just kind of stopping and looky-looing that day in the morning before we got the roadway open. We did get the roadway open about noon that day. Just a big shout out to our public works crews. They definitely went above and beyond multiple times in this event. And like I said, not only just responding to the fire, they also got called out when they did get to go home. They got called out for an intrusion alarm at one of our water facilities overnight, and spent quite some time dealing with that. And just to come back in the morning and continue the cleanup was a lot of dedication. So let's talk about Councilmember Newman's question. The main building is a total loss. It is not safe to enter. It is red tagged right now. They may be able to go in later on with an abatement company to get some of their belongings. We've been in contact with all of those business owners, and I know that the property owner themselves is also working with them to, if there's a way to get anything back that's salvageable and it's safe to do so, hopefully they can do that. The buildings next to it both sustained damage, either from fire damage. 909, which is the one on the left there to the west of the attic. It does have structural damage and is red tagged in the upstairs as well as the basement. The basement had 22,000 gallons of water in it that have been since pumped out, but there's a lot of inventory for some of those businesses that were located there that was stored in the basement. Smoke damage, fire. Had to check to make sure that the fire didn't extend into those buildings. So there's some walls that had to be opened up, floors and whatnot. But lots of smoke in all three levels. They all have basements and upstairs and ground floors. Going out to the east. So this is JoJo and Coco, the old Berryland mode in blue there. They have considerable smoke damage and are closed for the foreseeable future. They are working to open up some pop-up retail for Small Business Saturday. It's really trying to find inventory at this time is one of their big challenges. To the north is Buttered Biscuit. As John mentioned, they get quite a bit of water into their business. They were able to quickly get it out. I've heard good news that the fire department actually helped them by removing some of the toilets, which sounds minor, but boy, it helped drain that water out. So they appreciate that. That building is currently yellow tagged while they deal with the water remediation. And then to the west, the 905 building, which is Electric Coffee and JMJ, because of the gas line having to be pinched and cut off, and then where the gas line ran was under the rubble from the building as the excavators pulled it down. They have not had gas, but I found out right before this meeting that they have gas now. So that's positive. They'll be able to reopen. Right now, none of these buildings in yellow or red have power, and they cannot get power until they meet some safety checks. And Doug will be talking about that in just a moment. Chief Murphy will come up and, along with Chief Parkinson, give an update on the cause investigation.
Thank you, Jason. So obviously we had 3 officers on duty on the early morning hours of October 28th, and officers were able to respond first on scene. Like I said, it came as a report of the fire on North Street, so they came from the back. Got very good body cam video of really the intensity of the fire the time they first arrived in that Elk Cove area and coming from the outside, kind of lapping up. Wires are popping, and they'd already burnt through the service where they connect to the building, or dropping down to the ground. Officers then transitioned over to Main Street once fire units started to arrive, helped evacuate the, I think it's 1007, the Mason building. Couple tenants upstairs there, and then over at the old Buttered Biscuit, Berryland, there's about 4 apartments, refurbished apartments up there. And then from there, just kind of helped set up with the containment and traffic control. Saturday, the 29th, businesses contacted Sumner PD and made available their video that showed several transients in the area, both before and after the report of the fire, and then the progress of the timeline where officers were able to identify each one of the females depicted in the video from very frequent recent contacts. Later that afternoon, we contacted that individual that admitted to being in the back area. Initially just admitted that they were present with a warming fire. And then kind of it helped identify some of the other male transients that were also observed in the video. She was interviewed and then booked on some unrelated warrants. On Monday, October 31st, officers made contact with one of the transient males that was identified in the video and by the female suspect, and interviewed that individual. He further confirmed the identity of a couple other individuals that were seen in video, as well. He's also had video made available to us from a business on Main Street and a resident on North. And everything started to corroborate with the timeline. That male individual blames the female suspect that we booked on warrants for starting the fire. We gathered more video, retrieved some additional evidence from a dumpster near where the fire started. And then on November 3rd, we did a formal taped interview with the female suspect, and she admitted starting the fire by igniting cardboard next to the oil collection from the restaurant, the reclaimed or recycled cooking oils. And it's directly near the area where the 3 gas meters go and service the building. So that would certainly corroborate that part. We've been working with Pierce County Fire Marshal Roberts, Pierce investigators. All our case reports, videos, and documents were sent to the prosecutor's office on Friday, the 4th. And so we're just kind of just waiting for complete that circle and have them review the case for charges. We've sent out investigation bolos, which we call be on the lookout, for 2 additional male suspects that were seen on video They weren't implicated directly, but they were definitely there and observed the suspects starting the fire. So to try and interview them, it's kind of where we're at.
Questions for Chief Maricki?
Barbara.
So is she? Do you have her in custody?
She's in
Do
custody.
you
on-
have her in custody?
She's in custody on unrelated
charges?
charges. Yeah, and we'll remain that way as long as these other outstanding court matters, but then the prosecutor hopefully will make a charging decision.
And I mean, if she is convicted, what kind of sentence would she have?
I don't know. It's gonna vary vastly depending on what the prosecutor ultimately ends up charging.
Uh-huh.
Anybody else? Councilmember Newman.
Does your decision-making on like whether to charge? Well, first of all, thank you for the quick work and putting the pieces together. But does that decision impact even like the timeline? Where do the insurance companies come into play for the businesses damaged?
So
Like,
the-
does that help them close it
Well,
sooner?
I would think so. I mean, it's gonna rule out that it was caused by, you know, electrical or some kind of negligence on the part of one of the tenants or anything like that. I think it's gonna allow them to proceed much quicker. Sometimes these cause and origin investigations can go a long time. I think that's a benefit.
Yeah.
It
So
also rules out that there was it wasn't arson for insurance or any part of, they're all completely victims of a senseless crime.
right. Anyway, thank you for the quick work on putting the pieces together.
Jeff, can you see if anybody online has a hand up? Okay, thank you. All right.
Thanks, Brad.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Brad.
So obviously you can see that we continued working diligently on responding to this fire. First thing Monday, we got our leadership team together and came up with some other goals that on how we need to continue to respond. We did create a couple different direct constant contact email e-news lists that we used, and we're continuing to use one that's for all of the businesses downtown, and then a second list is more specific to those that have been directly impacted. That way we can make sure that they get the right information at the right time. We did schedule a second business meeting for Wednesday to share what we could on recovery efforts. Doug's department met with all of the affected property owners to talk about next steps, and I'll invite him up. In fact, Doug, why don't you come on up? Perfect. So Doug will talk about development services and what steps they took last week.
Great. So like Jason said, we, by Tuesday, we had met with all three business owners, and one business owner at 909 was out of town. So we met with the Spartan Agency who are representing him. And the message that we had for all of them was that the city is willing to help with streamlining permits and as quickly as we can. We just needed to get the information, but there's some things that they needed to take into consideration, which is all the asbestos that was in the building. The reason why the power is not turned on, as Jason alluded to, is because there's water still in the building. At 909, the valley of the roof where the water from the rain has a crack in it, and that was still dumping into there. We met on site with their structural engineer and their contractor on Tuesday, and they plan on patching that and fixing the runoff so they can stop the water going into the building. But still, it would be contaminated. That needs to be dealt with, and that needs to be abated. Whenever you do a demolition permit, one of the first things you ask them to do is an asbestos report to see if anything has asbestos in it, and then you have to abate it. So, and that was the same message we gave to all three business owners, that there was a process and that, we needed structural engineers to be on board here, because the east wall of 909 and the west wall of the Mason building were dependent on the building that burnt out. So to give you an idea of how streamlined we are in the process. We received drawings today from a structural engineer on how to support that wall for the 909 building. That was submitted today, and within an hour, it was approved by our building official. So they are now working towards getting the material and the product that they need in order to successfully make that wall structural. Now, there's a parapet on top, which is like an extension of the wall that goes above the roof line. That needs to come down on the north end of the building. It's kind of leaning over right now. So that's another thing that needs to be taken into consideration. There's a demolition permit that needs to be applied for. And then needs to be collaboration with all structural engineers. If they all hire different structural engineers, that they agree with the debris removal and how that process happens. So there's a lot of different pieces. And what we shared with them was that it's not going to be fairly quick because nobody has a structural engineer in their pocket waiting for this issue. So it's, but there was at the business meeting, the JMJ team had told the group that they had connections to a structural engineer, and if folks wanted to reach out to them, they could. But so I wanted to back up a little bit and talk about a yellow card versus a red card. Okay, a yellow tag is limited entry, and it's off limits to unauthorized personnel, which is us. Okay, just for an example. And if they want us to be able to get in there, they have to submit they get written authorization from the city in order to enter. But it also says here that this structure's safety is questionable and enter at your own risk. So, and there can't be any occupancy. You got to go in and get your stuff that you can. But again, you're in a smoke-filled building. I was in there for an hour on Tuesday, and my entire clothes were impacted and my throat was impacted just from the remaining smoke that was there. And so, going in and getting your stuff is, it sounds like it's really easy, but you're going to be a health risk, to yourself. If you have respiratory problems, you should probably wear a mask to go in there. And I wish I would have worn one myself after coming out of that. Red tag it's just completely unsafe, right? And these are both signed and posted by our building official on site. And basically you cannot go into that facility. Where we're at right now is they understand, each business owner understands what they need to do next, which is submit a structural engineer report for us to review that our building official will approve. And then also to start thinking about demolition permits. In the case of the attic building, we provided them with all of our information on the town center plan, the historical plan, the design review process, zoning, so that they can have their engineer start figuring out what they're going to be submitting for a plan for rebuild, because they've identified to us that they plan on rebuilding. So there's a number of things that have been communicated with each of them, and they've all been the same consistent message. They have all our contact information to get what they need from us, ask any questions we can. Tomorrow, the building official, myself, and associate engineer Joe Fessler are going into the basements to see if there's any remaining water, because that's going to be the ability for them to be able to turn on their power. And of course, we don't give that permission. PSC has to do their job to make sure that that building's safe, but they need the building official to say there's no more water, which he's concerned about. If there is, that it could restart a fire. They're turning on the power. So there's a lot of moving pieces here, and we're trying to be consistent with everybody as possible. And today was a successful day for us as far as getting a permit issued fairly quickly.
Any questions for Mr. Beagle?
So how do you get the water out and how do you get it cleaned? And
Great question. So they took the Bacter trucks, similar to us, and they sucked that out, and then they have to take it to an authorized facility that will abate that water accordingly. And that was the other message we told all the businesses at the business meeting, that was part of the process, that they can't just put it down our storm drain or our sewer. It has to be abated.
that's 22,000 gallons.
Yeah, there were a
That's
number of
amazing.
trucks that went to the facility.
Then what about all the bricks and everything, you know, that were taken down on that?
Yeah, so you can imagine that that report might say, the asbestos report might say that all of it's contaminated. So therefore it would have to go to a facility that could handle that contamination. So one of the landfills has the ability to take that and dispose of it accordingly. But that's something the city is waiting to see. What does that abatement report say? And then how do you think, you know, this little piece over here is okay, and then this pile over here is not, you know, it's probably the whole thing, in my opinion, needs to go to a facility that can abate it properly.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Brown?
Yeah, is it one owner of the boot area? Or is it multiple?
It's one owner for the attic building. Marshall?
Yeah, Marshall Bennett owns the attic building. In that building, there were at least 6 businesses.
All right, so everything was one owner.
In that building.
that
And then there's
building.
one owner for 909, which is the white building to the west that has the Valley Social Wine Bar, 512. And then there's another owner, the Masons, on the Mason building or the Phoenix Temple
To the east.
to the east. Yeah.
Anybody else? Pat?
Yes, so you mentioned that for a area that's, or building that's red tagged, there's no entry whatsoever. Well, so if a business owner really needed to get into that building for maybe insurance purposes, their documentation or something like that, are there resources or options for them to actually get assistance in getting into the buildings to?
Well, the city
They
would
really
rely
need-
on the structural engineer's report on whether or not they could access that. We would take that into consideration, but our building official would work with that group to see if there's a certain area, and if there's a possibility that they could get in there safely, they might, but you know, looking at that facility from the top of the roof on 909, like I was down, there's not much room to really say that's safe and you can go there. It's just total loss. It really is.
Okay,
I
thanks.
I would encourage council, if you haven't gone on the north side of that building, you'll quickly see that it's only a shell that remains full of rubble. The basement was actually, they were trying to get to the fire with the excavator. They filled the basement with the debris so they could drive in there and pull more stuff down. However, to your point though, red tags can become yellow tags. So like the 909 building, if the basement becomes safe, then that could move up to a yellow tag, right? So they do change as
Okay.
we get information.
Thank you.
Councilmember Reed?
Thank you, Mayor. So kind of a general question. First of all, thank you for the update, and I really hope that all of those that have been affected find a way or find a path back. On the front facade, like the brick facade in the front, is that likely going to come down, or is there a chance that that might be salvageable?
That'll depend on the structural engineer's report.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it might be early to tell, but it's hard to think that it would be salvageable from looking at it. But who knows? Engineers can do a lot of things.
And I couldn't really tell you how impacted that front was from the fire. You can't really tell from looking in.
Anybody else? Okay,
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. Next, Brian Windisch will provide an update on what he's doing from an economic outreach and recovery.
Thank you, Jason. So there's a number of different areas that I've been reaching out with state agencies in particular, trying to see what's out there for economic recovery. And one avenue is to pursue Small Business Administration economic injury disaster loans, or EIDL loans for short. And on Friday, I I sent out, emailed out an economic injury worksheet to each of the impacted businesses. And basically they go through and assess what their damage is, kind of what's beyond what insurance is going to cover. And then I received one back from one of the businesses, but until they're able to actually access, I'm guessing, their business and kind of be able to kind of work through that, it may take a little while for them to complete these worksheets. And what I'm going to be doing is submitting those to the Washington State Emergency Management Department. And then they'll assess them. And if they feel like we can have a governor's disaster declaration, then they will send that in and request that from the governor. If that happens, and this happened in Friday Harbor earlier this year, they had a big fire up there very similar to ours. If that happens, then the businesses will be eligible for these low interest loans in order to be able to obviously recover and purchase inventory and do what they need to do to get back on their feet. The Department of Commerce also has a small business flex fund loan that I'm exploring as well. The Employment Security Department, for those who have employees and they're unemployed, there's ways obviously for them to be able to help out. And what I'm putting together for next week is a meeting that will have the business owners basically meeting, and I think most of the state agencies will be virtual, but meeting with state agencies kind of in a virtual way in order to put faces to these large bureaucracies and have points of contact so that they can move through this process more easily and be able to get their questions answered directly with a contact. And I'm also just learned this evening, Cassandra suggested that the business owner, the property owner, Marshall Bennett, be sure and talk to the tax assessor to see about during this time between destruction and construction to get a reduced tax rate. So that's even to help as well. So I'll be passing that information along too. So I wouldn't say there's a ton of resources out there, but what's out there we're looking into and wanting to be passing that information on.
Right. I thought it was pretty good. Some of the businesses were saying that they'd already reached out to their insurance. And the wine bar reached out to their insurance and they wanted to know if their supply was good or not. And they're wondering, do we open every bottle and check it out? I volunteered to help, but it was interesting how they all got different responses from their insurance companies, but they were very, very happy with the city's response. And I think they're all in one big clump together. And I think going through it together has really helped them. So.
Thanks. Any questions for Ryan? All right. Next, Mike will talk about Public Works and
well, as you can see from this picture, I had my work gloves on. It's me with the back of my hands in my pocket, letting somebody else do all the work. When we arrived on scene, it was incredible how much water they were dumping on it. Those hoses really put out a lot of water. So the first concerns were the water supply. Our system was designed to fight fires, multiple fires, and we were able to keep up pretty well with the water, so that wasn't really an issue. We did arrive on scene. A lot of the catch basins, and especially the one behind the Butter Biscuit, had a lot of debris on it. So the guys cleaned that up right away. With the hoses, the way they were laid out, it directed water into different areas and kind of kept it from our main catch basins. So got everything flowing a lot better. The guys went downstream and they put wattles in the the manholes. Wattles are kind of stray straw logs. And so that helped catch the debris. The nice thing is we had just cleaned that whole system. So it was clean to begin with. The next day we went out and re-vacked everything. So we got most of the debris vacked out. It didn't end up in the river. So that was nice. And then we went in and jetted quite a bit of the system just to clean it out. The nice thing with Main Street, all that water flows through Rhubarb Alley, and we have cartridge filters in there. So we're able to suck all that out. Filters captured a lot of the contaminants, so that was good. And we have some more filters on order, so we'll be replacing those. The guys got out there pretty quick and cleaned up the sidewalks and the streets, and then got them in ship shape Saturday. So they were real Johnny on the spot and getting things going. And then, of course, we went downstream and kept checking the manholes to see if debris got down. So we were able to contain it and clean it up pretty well. Any questions?
Any questions? Nope.
I have one quick one. Where is Rhubarb Alley?
It's off of Main between,
The old Berryland and the Masons building. So between JoJo and Coco and the tattoo place.
Okay.
Main Street Tattoo.
All right, thank you.
Main Street Tattoo.
thank you.
Okay, one question
Well,
for Mike.
one more.
So you did feel that we had an adequate fire protection in our system for water and
it worked
places
really
for them
well.
to,
And through the whole thing, we still had some water bypassing from the springs.
were they using any fire hydrants or was it all from their trucks or?
Yeah, they were hooked to 3 or 4 hydrants. One nice one was that they hooked to Puyallups fire hydrant. We encouraged them to use most of the water out of there. so.
Okay. Okay.
We
I
could
think-
take
I think
this
they hooked
this
3
piece out.
3 of our hydrants and then the Puyallup hydrant.
Okay, so you didn't find any major problem in our system that we
No,
needed to take
it
care of? so-
Worked as designed.
All right, thank you.
Okay. We're good.
So resiliency, I mean, this is what this is all about, right? I mean, these 2 businesses right here, Valley Social Wine Club, or Wine Bar rather, and Main Street Tattoo, felt so embraced by the city's response as well as the community as a whole. They still showed up for Street of Treats. And the owner of Main Street Tattoo, he's there, I don't know what I think he might be Beetlejuice, right? So he's facing us with his hand up, and his wife has the green hair there. They said, you know what, we want to be here. We came to Sumner because of this, and we want to hand out candy to kids. Right? That's the mentality of these business owners. They're strong, they're resilient, and we are incredibly lucky to have them here. And I haven't heard any business owner say that they are not going to relocate and rebuild. Everybody wants to. So that's a testament to this. You know, there's a lot of other things going on. You know, as I just mentioned, the attic plans to rebuild Stuck Junction. They're doing a fundraiser right now, top right corner. You can visit their social media. You can also visit their Main Street social media for links to buy some sweatshirts and t-shirts to help their business, but also commemorate that they're going to be back someday. Whispering Hills, they're working on a pop-up market at the cannery for Small Business Saturday. Heritage Quest, they're cleaning 15,000 books. They're sending them away to be professionally cleaned. Ashley's Room, encourage everybody to shop their Puyallup store. They just located to Sumner a couple months ago. They plan on fixing up their clothing and then getting it back out for sale. 512, you know, I didn't realize how big 512 was until I was down at Seaside, Oregon, back in August. I've never seen so many volleyball courts set up on the sand down there. There's well over 100 beach volleyball courts. And 512, with their brick and mortar here in Sumner, was a lead sponsor in that, which I thought was really cool. A huge loss. They said it's going to take them close to 3 years to get their inventory back. They had a lot of inventory stored in the basement of 909. Valley Social, they're hoping to reopen soon. JoJo and Coco, as well as Mode, they lost all their inventory due to smoke. They hope to at least have some inventory back to reopen for Small Business Saturday, either at their current location or a pop-up, and then be reopened full-time after first of the year. So be watching. The city's going to amplify these as we can. A lot of partnerships. That's what's made this successful. You know, as I mentioned earlier, the Sumner Fire Fund, which is led by SMSA, but initially Sumner Rotary, like always, stepped up. The school district stepped up to get that started until SMSA could take the lead on that. A lot of businesses offering to help each other with co-locating retail and other things, advertising and employees. The chamber has helped amplify messaging. Just mentioned that Ryan just mentioned the SBA economic injury worksheets have been sent out. We're starting to get those in to really understand the scope of the economic impact. And then we're going to continue to meet with the businesses as necessary. The other thing that has come out of some of those meetings is the desire to work with the fire department to improve fire safety. So I've already talked to Chief Parkinson here about setting up a separate business meeting where owners could come in and talk to the fire department about their specific buildings and how they could make those structures safe or at least mitigate any damage. We're also working on our alley activation program. That it's interesting. We're doing a lot of outreach this week on the alley activation. It was already scheduled pre-fire, but that my understanding is taking a little bit of a different turn, right? We want to activate those alleys to make sure they're safe. We don't want people having warming fires behind businesses. It's not safe. And how do we make that less attractive through either landscaping and lighting and other security measures? And then, you know, keeping Sumner unique. This is why we have a design guideline in our code. You know, yes, the attic will rebuild, but it's going to have to meet our design guidelines in the town center plan. So that's how we preserve this into the future and preserve our community character. John, anything you want to add about fire safety before I wrap up?
I'll just mention really quick is, you know, we have starting about 1.5 years ago, we started doing annual fire and life safety inspections of all businesses throughout the entire district. To date, understanding that we cover 153 square miles, so a pretty large area, and that's 3 deputy fire marshals doing those inspections each day. We're a little over 50% complete on doing that. We have hit several of the Main Street businesses. And what we're doing there is just checking compliance with code. And now that catches a good chunk of things. So if a business happens to either be intentionally doing something wrong, typically it's just they don't know that they're doing something wrong. And maybe that's something like they don't have fire extinguishers, or they've locked an emergency exit, or they haven't serviced the hood of their in their kitchen that's going to extinguish a fire if something caught fire while cooking. So we catch those kind of things, and that's actually it's pretty common that we find something that's wrong. So we have the ability to tie in with all business owners and make sure that, you know, if they want to, we get to the front of the line and just work on if there's any code compliance, fire code compliance issues. But then, you know, in addition, then talking with them, like Jason said, on, you know, what else, there's a whole bunch of things that are outside of code that any business owner can do. This one's a difficult one. You know, if somebody wants to intentionally or unintentionally, you know, set your building on fire, unfortunately, there's not a great system for stopping that. You know, there's ways to minimize loss, but in a building of this age, it does become difficult. It becomes cost prohibitive if you're talking about things like suppression systems with fire sprinklers, or, you know, what kind of detection system do you have? And we did get calls, I believe, when it got into the attic, meaning the occupancy of the attic. I believe that's when the system actually started auto calling, and we were receiving messages from our dispatch center. So we did get notification eventually. So, but that's kind of the nutshell of, you know, that we do have an active part where we are working with businesses already. And so then we can, you know, cater some of that messaging and services to this strip to find out what we can do to help prevent things in the future.
Go ahead, Pat.
So with the deputy fire marshals working with the businesses, are you working with them to maybe just talking and maybe following up for compliance or actual citations being written?
So,
How does that process?
Yeah, and
work?
we have no enforcement capabilities. And so what 99%, 100% of our goal is just to work on the relationship, have business owners understand. Typically, people want to get in compliance. And typically, it's not a huge financial outlay. Sometimes it can be. We have, that I'm aware of, we haven't dealt with anything that's been large financial. It might be a security issue. And so, well, that's why we bolted our rear exit shut. And, well, yeah, but you can't do that. There's, we can work on different solutions, but that one's not the right one. So there's that piece. If we truly get into a compliance issue, then we turn it over to the city. And so building official takes it from there. And in all of the cities, I don't believe we've had to do that yet with any business. So like I said, typically it's a minor correction. They get the ability to make the correction and just effectively shoot us an email and say it's fixed. So,
Very good, thank you.
Are new buildings required to have sprinkler systems now?
yes. Yeah, the only catch would be depending if you had something that was small enough to not trigger that part of the code, but I can't think of any new construction that would fall under that. That's commercial occupancy.
But do they actually put a fire out, or do they just slow a fire?
You don't see many buildings completely consumed that have functioning sprinkler systems. Now, if the system failed or if somebody intentionally disabled it, that's a different story.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a scary story. Side note of this is right now there's a lot of theft going on. Sumner's being one of the largest impact of this, where we have thieves stealing the connections to the sprinkler systems off the businesses. So they're made from brass. So somebody can steal that, take it to a metal recycler and say, I want money for this. We've located a number of those. We've been in contact with Sumner Police on it. This is happening in Auburn. It's happening all up and down the valley just because of the large amount of commercial occupancies that have those type of connections in large warehouses. But that puts us at a disadvantage. So the sprinkler system can run, let's say, a few sprinkler heads. But if you've got a fire that's starting to grow, it needs us to come help support it with additional water. So something like that, where it's like, well, if the sprinkler system was working right, and if we were able to support it, it would put it out. But if, some vandals or some thieves happen to mess with the system, it would put us behind the power curve to be able to get ahead of the fire. So.
Anybody else? All right,
That's all of our formal presentation. Happy to answer any other questions the council may have.
any other questions? Go ahead.
I just really appreciate, I went down on Friday morning and it was just, eye-opening to see the amount of work, like you had that ladder truck, it went through the wires. And so I was, it was just to see that work and when they took the wall down. And then all the city employees that, came and, everybody really cares for this community and I, really appreciate everything that was done.
Thank you. If I could just add to that, this is one of those events that you hope never happens, but when it does, I couldn't be more proud of our employees and how they responded. And, obviously the fire department and the partnership we have there just is amazing. And like I told the business owners on Friday, I had all of our department, not all, but most of our department directors and some public works folks sitting in this meeting. Most of us have worked for the city for 15 plus years. This is a community to us as well. We may not necessarily live here. Some of us do. But it's definitely a community and it affects all of us and we want to see good things happen here. So couldn't be more proud of the people in this room and how they responded that day and how we're continuing to respond.
I agree.
Thanks for the update.
Yep. Thank you. Anything else? All right. Thank you, John. Now for our favorite topic.
Well, Mayor, I actually have a proposal.
Oh, I like that. Sounds promising.
It might be, it might not, it might be a bad idea, but looking at next week's agenda, we have South Sound 911. We also have the legislative agenda. And then we already carved out some time to talk about the final budget. So it's 8:15 right now. We could continue as planned and talk for another probably half hour, 45 minutes. Or if council would like, and if it's all right with the mayor, we could postpone this to next week and we'd still get done about 8:15 next week.
Who
I'm on-
says yes?
I'm on that.
I think it's yes. Up, Earl.
Yeah.
I think it's too important to do in a rush.
Yeah.
And to be tired. to do
Okay.
it.
So with
Okay.
that, I will adjourn this meeting at whatever time that says, and it doesn't. 8:15, how about that?